If you're new to pyrography or wood burning, you've probably encountered some issues that you've gotten frustrated with. I'm going to go over a few of the common mistakes that people encounter when they're beginners and show you how to resolve those. So one of the issues that people have when they first start burning is that they pick up the wrong tip for a project. A lot of times people are wanting to sign their names and they pick up a tip like this because it's small and pointy and they think they could sign their name with it. But in fact, this one is a skew, so it cuts when it burns. And if you go to make a circle with it, you can just make an arc. But because it's cutting, it's down below the surface of the wood. So if I go to make an O in one motion, it's going to skip out of that track. And if I have it deep enough in that wood, it's going to break it. So you need to learn something about the different categories that pens are in. So the first category is the writer category, and all the pens have a same characteristic in this category. They're a bent wire or a ball or a post with a grounded round end. And the reason for this is when it's rounded on the end of the tip, it allows the pen to go across the wood grain. So you can move the pen in any direction and therefore do writing motions with it. You can make circles and loops and L's and E's. The second category is the skew category, and these are tips with a knife edge. So you can see they're pointed on the end, that's called the toe, or they're rounded on the end, or they've got a lower point that's called the heel. It's either squared off or it's a sharp angle or it's rounded. And by being rounded, it allows you to curve the pen. But these all cut the wood and they only make straight lines or curved lines. If you want to make a circle, you have to make it in small little segments and pick up where you left off while you're turning the board. The third category is the shaders. They look like skews, and they actually are skews. They have a knife edge, but they've been bent at a 45-degree angle. So what you're looking at here in the pictures are a straight-on shot or a shot to the side where it's bent about a 45-degree angle. Some of them are a little less, some a little more, but mostly it's 45 degrees. And what this allows you to do is to put the tip on the wood like an iron and still hold the pen handle at a 45-degree angle. That allows you to do shading, so it looks like what they call the paintbrush, or it's tones in the wood. And then the last category is the branding and specialty category, and this is where you're just using the tip in a shape to brand the wood. And you can make circles, that's the first image, or snake scales, that's the second image, fish scales, the third image. This last one, the coiled wire, is actually a feather former, and it's made to drop on the wood and then drag it, so you can make all the barbs of a feather at the same time. And then the very last image is a coil burner, so you can make like a basket weave or different multi-line images. Another common mistake or problem is taking the writer pen, and when you're going with the wood grain, it makes nice even lines. But when you're going across the wood grain, say right here, you get it, depending on the wood grain, let me get some tighter grain over here, you get like a dotted line, or it's real bumpy. And the reason that's happening is I'm pushing too hard. If I can run my finger across this and feel the texture, I'm pushing too hard for a nice line. When I'm pushing too hard, if you pretend my fingers are wood grain, the hard grain, what I'm doing is I'm pushing down into the soft grain, and the hard grain won't allow me to pull it without snagging on that hard grain, and then it goes bump, bump, bump. So if I lighten my pressure up, I can go right across that without all the bumps. So the thing is, if you see bumpy lines like that, the first thing you need to do is try and lighten your pressure up on your pen so that you're not pushing too hard. Another common problem is hesitating when you're burning. Anytime you hesitate, you're going to get a blob. So if I'm drawing along and I hesitate, I'm going to get a blob there. So when you're trying to draw a line, don't just drop it and then pull it. Drop, pull. You're going to get a blob at the beginning of the line. Or if you pull the line and then stop at the end and hesitate, you're going to get a blob at the end. If you're very talented, you can manage to get a blob at either end and a very light line in between. And I'll explain to you what's going on there. What happens is you want to get a consistent speed and you want your pen in motion. When you get to the end of the line, simply lift it. So you get a nice even line. So you don't hesitate and pull, or don't pull and hesitate. To get this type of line where you see a dot on either end, what's happening is you're pulling too fast. You're coming down in motion, but you're too quick in between, and so it gets thin. So if you just slow that down, you're going to get a nice even line. So it's all about your speed and controlling your speed. Another common problem is it's tied in with the last one. If you are a fast burner and you burn too fast, look how fast this is. If you're real quick, you see how light it is? What happens is people that burn real fast like this, and see there's that double line. If you burn really quick, your line never gets dark enough, as opposed to if you burn slower. And you get a nice rich line. But if you're burning really fast, what happens is you have a tendency to turn the dial up on your burner and you get it too hot. You're around like say an 8 or 9 just to burn lines of this color. And what will happen is you're going to get a lot of extra heat up on your hand. And every time you hesitate while you're burning whatever design, if you hesitate just a split second, you're going to get blobs everywhere. You're also going to get, if it's really hot and you turned it up, you're going to get overburning, which means it's going to be an amber color on either side of your line. So just turn your heat down. You should typically be between, say, a 4 on your dial and, say, a 7. Somewhere in between there. It's not an absolute, but you're generally in that range. And then just do a nice, even, slower stroke. Not too fast, not like this. So slow down. So another problem people have is the shader, getting the shader to work where it's a nice even burn. One of the first things I'm going to tell you is to make sure that side to side you're very flat. You need to have this like an iron. It needs to be flat so you're not tilting it from one side to the other. So now I'm going to show you what usually happens. I've started out really dark and now I'm trying to get it lighter or darker, and now I have nothing and I'm getting very frustrated as a new burner. And so the way to get around this, where you're going from one extreme to the other where you can't even get the color in there, is to realize that these tips, nichrome wires, heat up very fast and they cool down very fast. This wood is already cold, so it's going to pull all the heat right out of that tip immediately. And if you don't allow it to recover, it's going to keep pulling it down to where now it's warmed back up and I'm going to be dark again, but now look at how light it is. And I can't even get a dark color out of that. So I'm going from this to this. So the way you get around that is to hold your tip up in the air, let it get hot, and then just very, very lightly, just barely touch with the tip and let it cool down. Now that it's gotten a little cool, now go ahead and put it flat and just do short overlapping strokes. If you need it a little bit darker, hold it up for a split second longer. But every time I pick it up and go to put it down, it's allowing this pen tip to recover its heat. If I go too far, then it can't recover. It'll be like this, where I can't see anything. Now, if you want to have a longer stroke, all you need to do is go for a second row. But I keep mine about 1/2 inch short. And see how it's getting a little bit lighter there? So just hold it up for a second and just continue on. If you see some uneven strokes in that, you can always go in the opposite direction to even it out. and make a nice even patch. Now I always pull mine towards, to get a flat shading like that, I pull it towards my elbow of the hand that's holding the pen tip. But I can continue moving this on and continue filling in that area. So I also have a new book out that's called the Quick Start Woodburning Guide, and in it it's got more information than what I'm able to give you today, but it also covers things like leveling an uneven shading area. So if you made it uneven, how to get it more even. So there's the techniques in there on how to do that. Okay. Another issue that people run into is trying to burn in the wrong direction. And what I mean by that is they set their board on their table and they try to burn everything in the same direction holding their board. But if you're coming along and you're doing a border along this edge, and then you come up and you do it this edge, and then you try and turn to this edge, and then you're trying to come down this edge, you're kind of contorting your arms, and what you need to do is turn for each side as you come around it, you know, and keep turning it. So turn your piece often instead of, you know, turning your arm into these weird positions. So that would make it easier for you. But there's other times when turning the board makes sense too. And that is when you learn a little bit about your pens. Say for instance on this wolf, if I want to do these whiskers here, and I get my little nice skew right here, which is how I did them. But if I tried to go this way, what's going to happen is, if I come around this way and trying to draw it, it's going to be thicker on the end of the whisker and thinner where I end up finishing. So it doesn't make sense when you have a whisker or a hair on the head. It needs to be thicker on the head and thinner where it comes off. So what I do is I turn my board so I can start on the head and come around and kind of whisk it off, you know, whichever direction. Just kind of whisk it so it gets thinner on the end, like this. And that's how you do it. Same thing with the fur. When I'm up here, as I'm coming off, I start on the head and come off and just whisk it away. So I can always turn this, you know, and do it this way. But you want to keep turning your piece so you get the best advantage of the thick and thin, the start of your line and the end of your line. So we want to start out with the shading where it's darker, and then as I pull it, I can make it lighter so it kind of fades away. So anytime I am working with something and I want it to be darker on the edge, I start with the line on the edge and then pull it so it's going to fade. Instead of the other way around. If I did this way, I couldn't stop at that line. So that's another point that I want to make to you. If I have any kind of shape, like say a circle, my shader should always be on the inside of that shape, and I'm going to turn it. So like here's the edge, I can pull it like this, and I'm going to keep turning it and keep my shader on the inside. If I try to do it the opposite way and pull it this way, my shader is hiding where that line is, and very likely I'm going to go outside of that line accidentally. Plus that you can see how hard it is where I start the line. So I want to have it this way and let it fade. Okay. Now, as far as those of you who want to know about this easel, this is a Lazy Susan turntable. It also raises up so that you can put it like this. It has 6 different positions, and there will be a link below on where you can get that. But this is very helpful, especially when you're wanting to do something like Celtic knotting or something where you have to turn your piece a lot. It makes it very quick and easy to turn this. It also helps when you're bringing your work closer to you, so you're not leaning over your work and the fumes aren't going into your face. It also comes with a stop that you just push in here, and it stops it from rotating. Okay, another issue that beginners run into is burning on the wrong materials. As far as materials, you want to pick something that is very light so that you can see you're burning, and then also very close grain, very close and not open pores like oak. Oak, your pen tip will actually fall into some of those open pores. So you want something very close. Now this is basswood. You can also use like poplar or maple. They're all good woods. Something that's domestic, you want to stay away from exotic woods like from the rainforest, and stay away from walnut. Has issues with woodworkers and they're breathing the dust. It has some carcinogenic issues from that, and so I just assume that you don't want to burn it either because you don't want to breathe the fumes. So I would stay away from walnut. It also, patina is so dark that you really can't see your burning after a while anyway. So stay away from those. Don't burn on MDFs, plastics, spalted woods, you know, black lines running through it, because none of that you want to breathe into your lungs, or you're going to have health issues. One of the things that's going to help you when you're burning, so that you're not breathing the fumes as much, is to open the doors and the windows if possible. Sometimes it's hard in the wintertime, but you want to get some air current through your room. You can also use a fan like this, a small portable fan, but don't blow it across your work, because every time your pen comes in and out of that zone, it's going to change your pen temperature. So you want to point your fan away from your work so that the fumes blow away from you. But they're still going to circulate in the room while you're in there and for about several hours afterwards. So keep that in mind when you're burning. Also, there's another type of fan. This is called an activated carbon filter fan. And as you can see, it has a carbon activated filter in there. And this actually traps the fumes. So this is different. You put this not across the table from where you're working, but right next to where you're working. And the fumes have to go through this first, and it traps the fumes. So that way you're not breathing them. It's actually trapped in this filter. These filters are not washable. You have to replace them, but each filter is approximately 250 hours of burn time. You can tell when you need to replace them because they start clogging up. As you can see, this one's a little bit getting clogged and dirty. So once they get dirty and you start smelling your wood burning again, then you need to replace the filter. So one of the other things that you can use if you find that you're not sure about the piece of wood, or you want to make sure that you have an extra layer of protection, is you can use a respirator. This one's a half mask, so it just goes over your nose and covers your mouth. But this is not a dust filter. This is actually for vapors, and it has a vapor filter. And you can find these, they're very inexpensive. They're about $25 to $30. So it's worth it, and your health is worth it. I'll show you the way that I do it. I use denim most of the time to clean my tip while I'm burning. And I just wipe it on the denim, because there are some materials that you'll burn on, like gourds, that get really gunky and you need to take that off. It also helps the carbon build up to just use a simple piece of denim, just like your blue jeans, and just wipe it off on there. And I would do that periodically. But once you go back to your board when you're burning, if you start seeing little black flakes and you've just cleaned it off, you need to do something else. And that's when I cut my machine off and I go to polish it. And what I use is a honing strop polishing compound. Because I have a wood carving background, I use this, because this is what I'm used to. And all you do is rub it on your leather, on your suede side of your leather. And then once that's done, you just rub your tip. Now make sure you do this cold, because you don't want to be heating this compound up and smelling it. So you just rub it back and forth. This is not how I polish my knives. I don't go back and forth, but on the tip, it's so small that I can do that. And it's just on the surface that you're going to be burning with, and then wipe it off on your denim, heat it back up, and you're ready to go, and it's nice and polished. I don't do this very often because I don't want to round off my tip edge very much. But I do this whenever I start to see those black flakes to get rid of the carbon dust. Now, if I'm doing a skew, I will actually lean it to the side because it's beveled on the edge. The cutting edge is beveled, and just lean it to the side and then lean it to the other side. And then wipe it off. Always wipe it off because that gets rid of the residue. And then for a writer, I just go back and forth and I rotate my pen and I turn it in different directions so I can get every side at that rounded end. If you'd like more information, check out my new book, The Quick Start Wood Burning Guide. I also have a leather pyrography book that came out last year if you're interested in burning on leather, which is a lot of fun if you haven't tried it. But make sure you're burning on vegetable tanned and not the chrome tanned leather. Thank you for joining me today, and look forward to hearing from you. If you have any questions, email me at the link in the description below. Thanks.